Subscribe, like, comment and share to support the channel. Thank you for the support. Silence filled the room after Vakir had told his request to the leader. "You bastard," shouted the shaman, who asked Vakir if he knew whose presence he was in to display such arrogance. The shaman complained to the matriarch that the people who are able to bathe in the hero's spring are high-ranked warriors, and that there was no need to listen to the trash known as Vakir request. Ahun agrees with what his grandfather is saying. He added on that only heroes who have proved their incredible strength can enter the hero's spring, making Vakir an ignorant bastard for asking such a question that was not in his place. But Ayan disagrees with Ahun and his grandfather. She argued that Vakir had already proved his strength by catching the ox bear at the pillaging ceremony. Akia the matriarch take note of their worries and arguments. She then looks at Vakir and asked if he even knew that the hero's spring is. Vakir, our boy, just looked straight at her and told her that he knew what the hero's spring is. But let me do the explanation. The hero's spring, it's the Balak shrine where only the strongest Balak warriors are submerged in. It's also a hot spring where both internal and external injuries recover just by bathing in it. Vakir knew some other facts from what Ayan told him. It takes a long time for the water in the hero's spring to accumulate, and only warriors who have made a special contribution can go there. Akia continues to stare at our handsome boy in silence. An elder with a mohawk haircut spoke out. He tells Akia that they couldn't send an outsider who just became a commoner to the shrine. An elder dressed like a mage beside him spoke out as well. He notes that Vakir has a promising future and that it wouldn't be such a bad idea to send him to the hero's spring once to motivate him. Another elder burst out in anger, wondering when was the hero's spring a waterhole that anyone can enter. Another elder states that since Vakir's body was in a rough shape and also a part of the family, then they should treat him well too. Akia overhears the various arguments and statements made about whether Vakir should be allowed into the hero's spring. Deep in her thoughts, she wanted to agree with Vakir's request, but it's also true that there wasn't a good enough reason to, and that it can't be helped since the shaman and guards were so against it. But a constant bell ringing soon catches her attention. The ringing noise can be heard throughout the Balak's camp. Vakir notices the sound as well and wonders if the bell meant it was time for war. Ayan tells him that it was a signal that meant that the tribe has a guest, and that there was no way any insane bastard would pick a fight with the Balaks in the forest. Akia begins to leave the tent first, but before leaving she tells Vakir that they would discuss this matter another time and that everyone should return to their duties. The shamans and elders continued to remain silent and seated as Akia left the tent, but soon a human's face was filled with anger and disgust as his eyes began to glow bright blue. Members of the Balak's tribe could be seen gathering in huge numbers. Vakir and Ayan had arrived on the scene. Vakir asks Ayan if that was their guest, to which she says yes. Human beings were everywhere carrying crates of goods with horses bringing more into the tribe area. Ayan explains to Vakir that the humans were merchants that could bring the Balak's things that couldn't be found in the forest. The Balaks would then anticipate and count down the days until the merchants comes. Vakir was not listening to what Ayan was saying as his attention was drawn to a certain symbol. He recognizes it as one of the 7 merchant families, called the bourgeois family. Vakir thought deeply about how the bourgeois family had to come here from the imperial capital, which meant that they had to cross either the Baskerville or Morgue family's territory. But how did they get here was the question that stuck in his mind. As Vakir knew that there was no way either of those families would permit their crossing, Vakir then thought that the bourgeois family had smuggled themselves in. A man with a huge mustache arrives and announces to everyone in the tribe that the 5-day market has arrived. He tells the tribe members that if there was anything they wished to barter, then please bring it here. The tribe members could be seen happily bringing over various things to barter with. A market is made with merchants calling out to the tribe members. The merchants introduce cosmetics and even a glass orb that makes you have sweet dreams when placed on your bed, as well as grains. Vakir continues to hang back and monitored the situation that was unfolding in front of him. He could see that the merchants had brought food and daily necessities that are distributed throughout the empire, but wondered what the tribe members were bartering: rare items that come from the dense forest for those measly things. Vakir knew that the merchants had no way of not knowing the value of the items the Balaks were trading with. He continues to question if the merchants were using the Balaks who were ignorant about the current market prices. Vakir turns around from this sight and continued to think that this was something the Balaks had to figure out themselves, as things would get annoying for Vakir if he steps in and someone recognizes him. Ayan could be seen shouting at the top of her lungs, stating that the deal was unfair as she holds onto a piece of corn. Vakir watches from the background as Ayan continues to argue with the merchant that it made no sense for her to trade a single diamond for a corn. Vakir was relieved to see that there was at least one normal person in the Balak tribe, but Ayan destroys his thoughts, but shouting that she at least deserved to get 2 corns for 1 diamond. She then poses in a victory stance as if she was in Fortnite and had won the 2 corns for 1 diamond, worst trade in history. Vakir could only stare away as he thought of Ayan as being hopeless after seeing her trade. 3 other tribe members could be seen arguing with the merchants. They complained about how the bar value of a pearl clam for today's radish isn't equal, and that they should get at least 2 radishes, while another yells at them for claiming something as a cabbage. The last member wouldn't give the merchants another deer antler. The merchant with the mustache could feel that he was losing the trade, so he tells the 3 members that he couldn't go against the Balak warriors and would give them what they wanted. The 3 members celebrated over their victory with a victory pose as well. The merchant smiles to himself as he thought of the Balaks as stupid bastards for celebrating, since they didn't even know the value of the items they were offering. Just then a little girl calls out to the merchant asking him if she could please have 1 glass orb. The merchant tells her that he had brought many with him but asks about what she could give in return. The sweet little girl opens her hands and reveals a sun-dung beetle larva. She explains to him that they were rare, yummy, and nutritious, but the merchant responded with a disgusted look on his face. May this guy end up in the deepest part of hell. Comment below if you agree with me. He immediately swipes the precious sun-dung beetle larva that the little girl had brought off her hands. A sad look grew on her face as she watched it fall to the ground. The merchant left her and thought about how pretty she looked for a stupid barbarian. As the little girl began to cry tears over her little dung beetle, the merchant thought about how she could be sold for a good price as a slave. A hand soon appears and pats her on her head. A voice calls out to the merchant. Vikri had finally decided to step in but looked a bit different. He tells the merchant that the trade with the little cute girl was invalid. Ayan sees Vakir and wonders what he was wearing while the merchant grew nervous. He was surprised to see that a barbarian could speak the imperial language. He tells Vakir that there was a misunderstanding regarding what he said just now, but Vakir repeats the merchant words of selling a Balak child as a slave. The merchant tried to cover up what he said, but Vakir tells him that that's not what's important right now. Vakir wanted the merchant to cancel all of today's unfair trades. Hearing the words unfair trade made the merchant angry as he asks Vakir about what was unfair. Vakir explains to him that the merchant had been marking these items at a price completely different from the current market price. Our boy looks at the merchant straight up in his face. The merchant grew nervous as he thinks about how Vakir was the only one who knew how to speak the imperial language. He then attempts to school our boy by telling Vakir that he talked as if he knew the retail price. The merchant quickly announces that this was a sacred trade that's been permitted by the Balak shaman, the proxy of the forest god, and that was something a little boy like Vakir shouldn't interfere in. Vakir slowly raises his hand and points at something. Vakir starts an ass-kicking lecture to the merchant. He tells the merchant that the corn he brought was worth 100 gold each, but the diamond he received goes for about 2 million gold. The merchant was alarmed to know that our boy Vakir had brains. Vakir continues his lecture by saying that when he grinds an ox-bear horn into a billiard ball, it would be worth about 1 million. It was the same price as the goblin but mushroom, which was a new medicine. Horror and shocked was written all over the merchant's face as he wonders how Vakir knew the exact market prices. 2 words: main character. Vakir then picks up the glass orb in his hand. He tells the merchant that the glass orb that gives the users sweet dreams when placed next to a user meant that they would certainly be drugged and only dream of sweet dreams. Vakir goes on to explain that on the surface of the glass orb, there are small holes and drugs fall out of them. The drug inside it is a cheap drug that harms upon long-term use, and Vakir knew that it's illegal to use it in the Empire, but the merchants had distributed this well. Vakir smashes the glass orb with his hand. He lets out the pieces of the broken glass orb along with its hidden goods, much to the horror of the merchant. Another member of the merchant group whispers to the mustache man about what was wrong, and he tells him that Vakir had found out about them. Ayan quickly asked Vakir if he had mentioned the words drug body harm. Vakir hesitates for a moment before telling her yes. Our waifu began to rage as she realized the main cause behind why so many of her people's health was deteriorating. Merchant gives off a faint smile and tells her that there seems to be a misunderstanding while thinking of leaving the Balak tribe for now, but something fast and quick pierces the shoulder of the merchant in an instant. He looks at it in horror before letting out a little bitch scream. Ayan had taken a bow and arrow from a fellow tribe member and shot the merchant with it. Members of the merchant group rallied around their leader to comfort him just as Ayan calls them bastards. She claims that the merchants had fearlessly fooled the Balaks. The rest of the Balak members soon realized what was going on as some of them started to inspect the goods. A dreaded feeling started to overcome the merchant upon being discovered by Ayan. He yells at his ground to take their things and run. The entire merchant group began to flee on the backs of their horses. Vakir questions Ayan about why she was letting them go since merchants were known for not returning a loss, but Ayan assures Vakir that there was no way she would let them go. She explains to him that for beasts that live in large packs, injuring them and letting them go is also a hunting technique. The merchant leader could be seen holding onto his injured shoulder while cursing at the Balak tribe members. Ayan continues her explanation about how they had the tendency to return to their pack when injured. A campfire is seen just as the merchant group finally slowed their pace. He shouts at a group of mercenaries decked out with weapons about how the Balak bastards had stolen their products. He then tells everyone to get ready for battle. Time for free experience points for our boy Vakir. Night soon arrives as a campfire is seen being lit in the middle of the forest. A bird is seen flying high in the air. It soon lands upon somebody's arm. They messed with the Balaks. There's only one way to take care of them, said a voice as Vakir listens to it closely. It's slaughter time, said Ayan as the eagle rested on her arm. Our waifu was about to rip these guys to shreds along with our boy Vakir, whose eyes were showing that daddy red glow. The group of mercenaries could be seen walking together through the forest lighted by the moonlight. A mercenary with an eye patch tells the merchant leader that he must have been shocked that the Balak bastards looted him. He continues to tell the merchant leader that words don't work on those barbarians and that he needed to kill them and turn them all into slaves. The merchant leader tells the mercenary that since it was his first time in the deep forest, he wouldn't know it well about how defeating the Balaks in combat was not that easy. The mercenary still felt confident about his skills. He asks the merchant leader about how he felt being scared and if that was the reason why he brought the mercenaries. He continues to question the merchant leader about how he was going to turn the tables if he got caught. The mercenary lights a match up, saying that the merchant groups and mercenaries had decided to split the gross earnings in exchange for being their escorts. He shows an evil smug grin on his face with a cigarette in between his lips. He tells the merchant that if it comes to looting, then the mercenaries could treat everything as theirs. The merchant leader was nervous and silent upon hearing the disgusting words the mercenary spoke with, but he soon turns forward and tells the mercenaries to do as they please. The mercenary was happy to hear that and asks a question. He wonders if the Balaks were really that special, since they wanted to exploit nighttime. The group wanted to ambush the Balaks while setting them on fire and finally to slaughter them, making them done for. The eye-patch mercenary continued to talk while two other members could be seen fight over the lit match. One of them grabs the member holding the lit match and tells him to not blow out the match since he needed to use it too. The guy holding the match decides to hand it over, but he tells the other guy that it was a rule that only 2 people can use a match, and asked him if he had heard on the battlefield that 3 people aren't supposed to share one match, but the friend didn't listen to him. He continues to light his cigarette with the lit match, telling the other member that he didn't believe in such superstitions. Lucky for him, he gets to meet God straight away as an arrow flies directly into his skull. Just before he could blow one puff of his cigarette, the mercenary with the eye patch continues to talk to the merchant leader about his history and how he caught barbarians and sold them as slaves. But the man didn't even realize that his party was being sniped one by one. Even an arrow reached inches from his face. The merchant leader could only look in shock as blood spilled everywhere from the mercenaries being sniped by arrows. The group of mercenaries began to cover themselves with their shields, but they were still getting sniped by the Balaks. The merchant leaders yells at them to extinguish their cigarettes as the Balaks had found them. Ayan and her Balak tribe had appeared with their bows drawn and ready to fire. She commands her troops that she wouldn't allow any of them to hit the mercenaries and merchants anywhere else but their heads. She tells the Balaks that it's time to show them how scary the Balaks are. Vakir stares in amazement and wondered if the light from the cigarettes was all the Balak warriors needed to shoot their arrows so accurately. Another member of the tribe appears while carrying 2 barrels. He calls Vakir a slave and tells him that Tay had finished preparing what he asked for. Vakir reminds him that he was a commoner and no longer a slave. The tribe member laughs and tells Vakir that he was being timid for fussing over something like that. The group of mercenaries could be seen cowering behind their shields to block the hail of arrows coming from the Balaks. A bald man orders mages to gather up, to block the arrows with the shields while the aura users prepare to counterattack. An arrow, covered in blue arrow, is seen flying through the air with a rope attached to it. The mercenaries could only stare as the arrows landed on the trees above them. Carrying between the 2 arrows a barrel, more arrows attached with ropes are sent flying into the trees. The space above the mercenary group were soon filled with barrels hanging above them. The bald man was alarmed to see that the Balaks had launched alcohol barrels. He looks at the barrels that began to leak a dark fluid and mutter the words, No way. Flaming arrows were then sent flying into the alcohol barrels in the trees. It caused an explosion in front of the mercenaries which lighted the whole place as if it was the 4th of July. Yeehaw! The merchant leader had hid himself behind a tree. He watches the mercenaries being burned alive and hears their screams of pain. They shouted that the Baloks had started a fire. The merchant leader continues to watch the flames engulf the mercenaries, thinking about how the Baloks had tied ropes to arrows and launched oil barrels. This was something that was unheard of as he continues to wonder about how the Baloks had gotten that intelligent. Oblivious to him, Vakir was walking towards him from the shadows. Like an assassin from Assassin's Creed, he sneaks up to the merchant leader. Vakir finally lets out a heavy footstep which catches the attention of the merchant leader. He recognizes Vakir as the meddlesome Balok bastard. Vakir appears with arrows on his back and with his eyes turned red. It's time for the bloodhound to hunt. The merchant leader pleads with Vakir, telling him that he would regret it if he killed him. He then reveals a piece of paper, stating that this was the exploration permit he had received from the underdog city. It was the official seal from the newly appointed deputy consul, meaning that if Vakir kills the merchant leader, the Baskerville family will come for him. Vakir then asks the merchant leader if the deputy consul he was referring to was named Vakir. The merchant leader immediately tells him that he was right. It was that infamous Vakir. Let's say a small prayer for the merchant leader, guys. How strange. I don't remember permitting that, said Vakir as flames grew around him. His disguise was removed and his eyes turned a bloody red. The merchant leader was horrified to see that Vakir's skin looks different from before, but he soon realizes something. You're really Vakir, was the merchant leader's last words. An arrow struck him straight in the head body and on the piece of paper he was holding. Bullseye. Vakir had fired the arrows that slain the merchant leader. He tells him that those who forged the Baskerville seal are to be executed. Ayan soon appears behind him on her pet wolf Bakira. She still calls Vakir a slave and tells him that they needed to run away. Vakir looks at her and reminds her that he was no longer a slave. Multiple arrows could be seen stuck onto various shields. The mercenaries soon realized that the hail of arrow attacks from the Baloks had come to a stop. They rejoiced in joy and shouted out to one another that the Baloks were retreating. They stated that the fact that the Baloks attacked with fire meant that they were not confident. The mercenary group decides to chase after them right away. A member of the mercenary group shouted that if he catches the barbaric bastards, he would butcher them straight away. But just as he was yelling, a familiar pillar of death covered in a purple aura appeared behind him. It's our queen, Madame Eight Legs. She appears and started to rain down pain onto the mercenary groups. Vakir could hear the screams of the mercenaries as they yelled out that there was a monster. Ayan praises Vakir for calculating the madame's appearance and for thinking of using fire as a tactic. She states that Vakir had become a great Balok now. Vakir continues to look behind and tells Ayan that was how he felt every time he sees her. He looks at the numerous legs of Madame Eight Legs as they reached high into the sky while being covered in a deadly purple aura. He tells Ayan that that was a disaster. Akia was wearing a smile on her face as she tells Vakir that she would permit him to enter the hero's spring. She continues by stating Vakir's various achievements, from resolving the food shortage issue by catching an ox bear, concluding the previous battle without any casualties by using oil barrels, and discovering that the cause of the infection that was bothering the Balok warriors was caused by cheap drugs. Akia concluded that there was no doubt that our boy Vakir was a brave warrior. She touches his shoulder while the shaman showed a dark expression on his face in the back. Akia then tells Ayan to take Vakir to the hero's spring since it was a full moon tonight. Ayan agrees and began to stood up. She wraps her arm around Vakir and tells him, serves him right. Vakir was curious by what she meant by that. It turns out she was referring to a human. She tells Vakir to look at a human, not saying a single word. It was said by him that the reason why the warriors were unwell was because they were cursed. But due to Vakir's actions it caused a human's words to hold no weight now. A human could be seen struggling to hold his anger within himself. Vakir wonders if it was really a curse as he recalls the memory of when the merchant leader had told him that the sacred trade had been permitted by the Balok shaman, who was the proxy of the forest god. Night soon arrives as a full moon lights the skies. Vakir's bubblicious body could be seen submerged in green water. He takes a deep breath and chills in the waters where other animals could be seen floating around as well. He takes a scoop of the water in his hand, thinking that his mana was taking a step closer to purity. He could feel his broken bones and muscles starting to heal. He noted that the old shaman didn't cause a fuss without a reason, as he probably wanted to come here himself. Although it was not as effective as the River of Styx at the Baskerville side, the hero's spring was better since there was no age limit. Vakir then asks Ayan who could be seen soaking in the waters of the hero's spring beside him. lucky main character. Comment below how many of you guys want to take a dip in those waters as well. He asked her about whether the efficacy would be halved since she was inside the waters as well, and Vikir was certain that the matriarch mentioned that only he could go in. Ayan wonders if that was really important since real Balaks do not fuss over minute things like that. She then tells Vikir to thank Sir Adonai for finding this hot spring. Vikir wondered who Sir Adonai was. Ayan explains to him that Sir Adonai was the only person who can fight against the madam that lies within the deep forest. He was the best warrior among the Balak legends. She teases Vikir that since he had become a dignified Balak, he needed to make sure to respect Sir Adonai, but Vicky was reluctant as he tells Ayan that he would respect Sir Adonai only if he fought against the madam head-to-head. Ayan screams him that it was true. She shakes her head in disappointment over the fact that it was hard to communicate with outsiders, but her face started to blush as she remained silent while thinking deeply about something. She recalls her mother's face, who tells her that since Vikir had become a commoner and has a good reputation within the village, she notes that when Vikir recovers with the hero's spring and can become the man he should be, he wouldn't be that bad of a husband. Can anyone else hear the wedding bells ringing? Ayan ends her flashback and glances over to her side. She sees Vikir's sexy, hot, delicious body with his hair pulled back. Ayan decides that today was the day she was going to make Vikir hers. Guess someone wants that Baskerville D. Thanks for watching the latest part from the Voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.